Happy Friday, Dog Nation. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. Final live show for me before a series of pre-recorded shows next week while I'm on vacation. I think you're going to really like these vacation week shows, though. We've worked really hard to make these as much like normal shows as possible. We do have comments, although they are not, of course, read live, but we've had some great feedback from a lot of folks around Georgia football. We'll do that as part of the end of those shows next week. You all can still interact in the comment section as per usual. Really good content. Obviously, it's not the day-to-day reaction of the news, but I think it's going to be really good. I would say these may be the best vacation week shows that we've done. So we have certainly worked hard behind the scenes this week trying to put that together. It may be one of the reasons why my voice sounds so lousy right now is the fact that we've done so many shows this week. But I'm not complaining. I am happy. It is a getaway day, but we are not mailing it in. We got a lot to do on the show today. Jeff Sentell interview coming up. It is also pre-recorded. Jeff is on the road here for a couple of days as well, enjoying some time off. So we're going to load up. We're going to do a bunch of stuff. We'll react to the playoff news. It certainly seems like college football is heading in the direction of a 12-team playoff, and a whole bunch on the way. It's coming up next. DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So I want to be very honest about something here for a moment. I do have an agenda with today's show. It is the final show for me before going on vacation next week. We do have a great series of vacation week shows coming up next week, but this is the final live show that I'll do again until the following Monday. And so it's one of those things where you want to kind of end the week on a good note, right? I mean, I do like the idea of, even though one, a lesser broadcaster might be tempted to take it easy and kind of, mail it in on the way out the door. We're not looking to do that around here. And even more so, we're looking to actually finish the final show before vacation on a very high note, a lot of positive content, a lot of fun on the way out the door. So my agenda for today is to take what has kind of dominated the news over the course of the last couple of days and sort of spin that in the most positive way possible so that we can all have kind of a happy feeling as we close out a week and as I close out a work time here before heading on vacation. So admittedly, I'm kind of looking for the positive in this story, but I don't think actually the positive is necessarily all that difficult to find. Many of you are aware of what's going on around UGA this week, the decommitment from five-star defensive tackle Bear Alexander, the decommitment from five-star athlete Deion Bowie from the state of Georgia, from Bainbridge, Kirby Smart's hometown. Instrumental in all of this would appear to be former UGA staffer, graduate assistant at UGA Nick Williams, now working as an analyst at Texas A&M, and there's been a lot of almost remnants of the thing that seems to pop up, and it's now become a little bit of an ongoing running joke amongst Georgia fans of what's wrong with UGA recruiting. There seems to be a little bit of what's wrong with UGA recruiting kind of popping up around this Alexander and Bowie story. And the reason why the what's wrong thing has become a little bit of a meme among UGA fans is because in actual truth, in all honesty, there is very little wrong with UGA recruiting in this moment or in any moment. Georgia, is among the, if not the very best recruiting program in the country, among the very best recruiting programs in the country, essentially guaranteed of at least a top 3 class every single year, and certainly knocking on the door with the possibility of being the number 1 overall class for 2022. There is obviously very little wrong with UGA recruiting in the big picture, but there are these moments that kind of pop up that kind of provide fans some angst, and the Alexander and Bowie decommitments are a little bit of an example of that. But let me kind of give you a little bit of pushback here for a moment on both these stories as to why maybe this isn't the kind of thing that you ought to spend the weekend worried about, even though we've certainly talked about it a lot on the show the last couple of days. Let me start with this. So Georgia loses Bear Alexander, not to Texas A&M, although he may eventually go there. For now, all it is a decommitment from the Georgia program. And so you're kind of left to wonder, what does Georgia do on the heels of losing a commitment from a 5-star defensive tackle? Well, what it does is it just simply brings in another 5-star defensive tackle on campus. I'll show you this picture on Twitter. Really good stuff here from Walter Nolan, another 5-star defensive tackle who says, #GoDogs. Great unofficial visit today. That was yesterday from Nolan. Good-looking picture. Looks great in the black jersey, the Georgia uniform there. That's a great thing to be able to see. D.C., surrounded by some folks who are apparently close to him. And this is the kind of thing that most programs simply would not be able to do. On the heels of losing Alexander, to say, well, that's okay. We got to get ready. Walter Nolan is about to visit here. And that's okay. A few days after that, Travis Shaw, another 5-star defensive lineman, is also coming in to visit UGA. We've got to shake this off and go get ready to entertain those guys. Now, listen, I'm not going to tell you necessarily that that Nolan is for sure coming to Georgia, the same way I couldn't have told you that Alexander was for sure coming to Georgia even before he decommitted from the program. But the idea that somehow the well has dried up for Georgia with 5-star defensive linemen because of Bear Alexander's decommitment, the presence of Nolan on campus this week is obviously an example of that. And by the way, we kind of scoffed the other day at the notion that Nolan might be shutting down his recruitment. It certainly seems like the recruitment's still going at full speed there right now. So this is, I think, important context for Georgia fans to remember in regards to all of this. That, yeah, it's clearly a setback when Alexander, decommits. And even if that was always going to be a very difficult player for Georgia to hold on to for its 2022 class, there's still some disappointment when it takes place. But this is kind of like lowercase letter disappointment. This is kind of a more muted version of disappointment because literally Georgia remains in the mix and in the fold for many of the very top defensive line prospects in the country in a year in which rare to see this many elite defensive linemen in a recruiting cycle. It seems like this particular cycle has a good many of them, and it's been so exciting to see Georgia involved with as many as there have been there. Now, here's the other thing. You're seeing a lot of comments this week. If you look at our YouTube comment page or our Facebook comment page, we're doing this show live. If you watch the way that Georgia fans are interacting on social media, if you check out the forum at forum.dawgnation.com, there's this conversation out there of that somehow Kirby Smart got played when Nick Williams was allowed to leave for Texas A&M. And somehow this was Jimbo Fisher flexing, and maybe Georgia wasn't properly using its off-field support staff as well as it could if someone like Williams, who has, at least for now, appeared to be so valuable to Texas A&M, was allowed to get away, that Georgia didn't do everything they could do to keep him or somehow didn't have him properly prioritized in all of this, that something's wrong with the way that Georgia is utilizing its support staff, its graduate assistants, its analysts, the guys that kind of make up the army of staffers beyond just the 10 on-field coaches. And let me just at least give you one thing to think about. And I know we've kind of talked about this a little bit already this week, but let me just give you one more thing to think about on this. And maybe this lands somewhere with you, and maybe this doesn't. Maybe this matters, maybe it doesn't. But think about what else Georgia has going on when it comes to its off-field coaches, its analysts, right? Williams now an analyst for Texas A&M, at least in terms of convincing some big names to decommit. It seems like Williams is kind of paying off a little bit for Texas A&M. Now, we'll see how many of those guys actually turn into true pledges and eventual signees for the Aggies. But for now, Williams would seem to be instrumental. But it's not like Georgia hasn't already benefited during this recruiting cycle from some of its own off-field analysts as well. Do you remember when Jalen Walker, the very impressive linebacker from North Carolina, do you remember when Walker made his commitment announcement? DawgNation was live on the scene and on hand for that. And when Walker was talking to the folks in the room about why Georgia, I know this audio is going to be a little bit difficult to hear because it's kind of got the room noise. It's kind of one of those things that, sometimes you don't have quite the mic right in front of the guy's face, and so you kind of pick up some room noise. There's a little bit of room noise in the audio that you're about to hear of Jalen Walker. But listen to what he kind of rattles off as his reasons for choosing Georgia. The first name that he mentions, before even mentioning Kirby Smart, by the way, is not one of Georgia's assistant coaches, but one of the guys who's working for Georgia right now as an off-field analyst. This, Jalen Walker from a few months ago.
Georgia, I feel like that fits me the best, their staff, Coach Muschamp, Coach Smart, Coach Lanning, Coach Schumann, all great defensive coaches. It's always a good thing to have a decent head coach. And I've heard stories of him always helping around in practice. Having a hands-on coach is always the best fit for me. Just Georgia overall, LBU, in my opinion, always brings out the best linebackers and development and skill. But Georgia just fits me.
So did you hear what Walker said there? And I'm literally asking that, not rhetorically, because that's not the greatest audio to kind of pick up on. What Walker says at the very beginning of that clip is, hey, I love the staff at Georgia. And he mentions Coach Muschamp. Now think about this for a moment. This is a week in which we are told, oh my gosh, Georgia's not using its sports staff as well as it could. Kirby Smart's not prioritizing his analysts as well as he could. He didn't know what he had with Nick Williams, and Nick Williams has gone away, and Nick Williams has convinced guys to decommit from the Georgia program. That may all be true, at least in terms of the fact that Williams played a role in their decommitment. I don't fail to acknowledge that. But this notion that somehow that Georgia's not properly utilizing its support staff, one of the very best linebackers in the country just a couple of months ago, upon announcing why he had chosen the University of Georgia, mentioned Will Muschamp by name as one of the reasons that he's at UGA. I mean, this is an example of Kirby Smart using his own analysts as a way of benefiting UGA recruiting. And it's one of those things where you have to kind of sometimes pull back and see the full picture. That right now, Nick Williams seems like he's the man of the hour because of the Bowie thing and the Alexander thing. And I'm not downplaying, his role in all this. Williams may be a coaching star on the rise, and eventually you may see him doing big things somewhere in the SEC as an on-field coach. But for now, the idea that Georgia's recruiting efforts for this 2020 cycle were going to hinge on the idea of keeping Nick Williams, clearly that's not true. Other guys who are not even coaches, like Will Muschamp right now, are also themselves paying big dividends for UGA recruiting, and I just sort of think that is fair to mention. Let me kind of move on off that topic. I was going to do a little bit more, but we're kind of going along on that for now. Let me completely shift gears to this. You may remember over the weekend, I think it was Sunday night, when upon the rumors and the rumblings about Brandon Turnage, the former Alabama defensive back, possibly changing his mind about coming to UGA, and there were some thoughts about what does the arrival of Darian Kendrick from Clemson have to do with all of this, or is this related to something else in regards to Turnage or whatever may be going on there. In kind of the aftermath of that, we also saw another defensive back, Caleb Evans, announce on Twitter that he'd gotten an offer from the University of Georgia. You see it there on your screen if you're watching on video, him saying blessed and grateful to receive an offer from the University of Georgia. That tweet, I think, dropped around 8:30 p.m. or so, a couple of hours after a lot of the Turnage stuff had been kind of unfolding. And so that was kind of like the next big twist and turn to that saga of would Turnage be at UGA or not, the fact that Georgia had offered now another defensive back in Evans. And, Georgia's clearly had success when it comes to taking defensive backs from Tulsa before. That's where J.R. Reed came from before arriving at UGA. Reed became an All-American playing in this program, one of the real leaders of the Georgia defense. And so that may be reason enough alone for UGA fans to at least be interested in Evans after Evans said he had gotten a Georgia offer. Well, Caleb Evans has been back on social media this week with more news to offer, and now letting us know that he is ready to make his college decision. I'll show you this once again on the screen there as well. He says yesterday that I'll be committing tomorrow night at 7. That means tonight. Now, it's not clear to me if this is 7 Central Time or 7 Eastern Time, but either way, sometime this evening, Evans will be making his college decision. He says it's going to be posted on his Instagram first. That's at a Caleb Evans on Instagram. That's with a Y, a Caleb Evans on Instagram. So he says you can go follow him there. So it looks like Evans is getting ready to make his decision. Is Georgia the team here in the mix for all this? I have to admit I have no idea, but it's probably at least worth Georgia fans paying a bit of attention to. And as Evans gets ready to make a pledge here, I guess in a way it could also be a possible moment in which we may find out, I guess, some finality one way or another on Brandon Turnage there as well. I mean, at this point in time, I guess it's more likely that Turnage really isn't coming to Georgia, although I guess until you hear something official, the idea that the door is still somewhat open, maybe that's a possibility there as well. Once again, I have to admit I don't really quite know about that either, but we will find out something one way or another about Evans, who has a Georgia offer out there, getting ready to make his announcement tonight. So let's watch that. Let's see if that has any impact on Turnage, if that closes the door on this completely, or if that remains a possibility out there as well. So tonight could be a night that UGA fans might want to be paying attention to their phone, their social media too, because you may find out about a defensive back who has, as he says, an offer there from Georgia. So a little bit of a story worth watching. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Kroger, and we're glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Radio Noon. Looking forward to being back on the radio on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref after my vacation. As I told you before, last live show today. We're on vacation next week, and then looking forward to being back on the radio again after that. Really excited about that. And, of course, as a podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really glad to have you this here today. And a big thanks to our friends at Kroger for making it all possible. Kroger got everything you need to get ready to celebrate Father's Day. You can do that with your local Kroger here. Kroger.com/grilling is the website to go to. Obviously, dads love grilling and all those great, whether it be the outdoor stuff to go along with the grilling or the recipe stuff to help, kind of cook the meal. Dads love all of that. It's a great way to show your dad some love as we head towards Father's Day. So Kroger.com/grilling for more detail on that. Kroger.com/grilling. And to all the dads here in our audience, certainly wish you a happy run up towards Father's Day and hope you get ready to enjoy that and the rest of this summer here right now. I trust that you probably are. All right, we're going to talk to Jeff Sentell here in a moment. We'll go on the road. It's just about AAA with him. We did have to pre-record this. So to be completely honest with you, we react to the Bear Alexander decommitment. I did have to edit out part of the video because I kind of asked him about Deion Bowie prior to Bowie backing off his pledge from Georgia, and so that became kind of dated, so we took that out. So it is one of those things where Jeff is traveling and enjoying some time with family here over the course of the next couple of days. We want him to be able to do that. So because of that, we're a little bit different with our interview with Jeff here today, but I think it's still worth your time. Good insight and good thoughts from him about kind of what exactly went down with the Alexander situation. This was our first chance to kind of really get some question and answer type stuff from Jeff on this. So I actually thought that was really good, and we'll do that here coming up in just a couple of moments. Before that, though, I want to go around the doghouse, and I want to go back and I want to read something to you that I read to you yesterday, because there's like one word that has been kind of bouncing around in my head a little bit ever since we did this on the show yesterday. It was the SEC, it was the portion of the SEC statement in regards to the name, image, likeness intervention that I think college sports is seeking from Congress before a lot of these state laws, including one here in Georgia, go into effect later on this summer. And the SEC statement addressed some of the concerns that the SEC has with the name, image, and likeness laws. And as I said before, there was one word in this statement that really stuck out to me, and I wanted to highlight that for a second. Can I show this on the screen? And I want to read this a little bit. So this is what the SEC said, and we read a portion of this to you yesterday. Among the complex issues that must be addressed is the role that, quote, advisors will have in guiding student athletes in the process for verifying and regulating these advisors. And if you want to, you can take that back down, because that's really all I wanted to read from that statement. The word advisors in kind of quotation marks there, I guess scare quotes, you would almost call that. And that's the word I've been thinking a lot about, because the more I think about the current landscape of college sports, it's the notion of that advisor that I think stands as one of the biggest potential problems facing the players who play college football. This is one of those things where I think if you have a college football player in your life, or if you know college football players, or to the extent that you kind of come in contact with them, I think the message that we ought to be giving the players as they either get ready to continue their college careers or start their college careers or whatever else is be careful who you're taking advice from. Be very, very careful about the advisors that you bring close to you, because it does not take very much work right now to look around the landscape of football and just see some examples of bad advice. I'll give you a couple of these. Bud Elliott, who covers recruiting for 24/7 Sports, has been saying some interesting things on Twitter over the course of the last couple of days in talking about the number of players in the transfer portal and who's leaving and who's going places. One of the things that Elliott says is, he's not mentioning names because I'm assuming he wants to protect some privacy, but one of the untold stories that Elliott says in college football right now is the fact that some of the players who are going in the transfer portal and then transferring to other places, Elliott says, are actually taking walk-on situations at their new school as simply a way to save face so they don't have to be seen as publicly dropping down a level. In other words, here's an FBS level player or a Power 5 level player. He goes in the transfer portal and literally he has nowhere to go. And we've already told you before that the overall statistics related to this, about 75% of the players in the transfer portal right now apparently don't really have anywhere to transfer to. And some of the players who realize they may be one of those players, a guy who's assuming the grass was greener, or maybe was advised to believe the grass was greener, you get into the portal, you find out, no, I really don't have any other offers out there. And so as a way of not facing some sort of personal embarrassment, as the way it was described here by Elliot, they simply take a preferred walk-on offer somewhere else, no scholarship money anymore. That way they don't have to be seen as dropping down a level or having made a horrendous decision to go into the transfer portal. I think that's really, really sad. Apparently that's the reality right now. Players need to be careful who they're taking advice from. I'll also mention this very quickly. Albert Breer, who writes for Sports Illustrated, covers the NFL, had a very interesting blurb in one of his recent stories involving Jamie Newman, the former Georgia quarterback. And listen, I don't take pleasure in this. I'm like a lot of Georgia fans. I wasn't super happy with the way the Newman thing played out. Many of you weren't there as well. But it's not like I wish Newman ill after that. I mean, I still, wish him well. I'm not, looking to bash him, trash him, or anything else. But many of you do know what happened to Newman this week. He was cut by the Philadelphia Eagles. And upon getting cut by the Philadelphia Eagles, has not really latched on with another team there as well. And obviously, this is all really weird in some NFL circles because you want to go back to this time a year ago, Newman was prominently being mentioned as a potential first-round pick, certainly second-round pick. He was very, very highly mentioned in many mock drafts, and all of a sudden now, he goes undrafted and has no team to play for. Now, maybe he gets on one by the time, camps roll around or whatever else. But as it stands right now, Jamie Newman does not have a football home after opting out from the University of Georgia. And that seems like Newman probably took some really bad advice. Be careful who you take advice from. What Breer wrote about at Sports Illustrated was that the problem that maybe Newman ran into, other players going to run into this, is the idea in the early stages you're told, ooh, you can be a first-round pick. And I like the distinction, or at least I thought the distinction that Breer drew on this was very interesting. There's a difference between having seen someone on film. NFL scouts a year ago would have seen Newman on film. And Breer said the other level of this is actually having studied someone on film, where now all of a sudden you're really just trying to drill down and decide really, truly how good of a prospect this really is. Not just seeing the things that he's capable of doing, but seeing the things this player consistently does, or seeing the weaknesses this player might have, going beyond just watching them on film and actually studying them on film. And what Breer said was, in the case of Newman, it appears that once he was more than watched on film, once he was studied on film, all of a sudden the evaluation of Newman really changed at that point. And obviously, you can kind of understand how that might be the case here. So a guy who maybe thought his draft status was secure, decided to opt out from the University of Georgia, if that's indeed the way that played out, boy, it just really seems like he got some really bad advice. I think this is the biggest problem plaguing college football right now. The so-called advisors that the SEC mentioned there, who might be looking to tell folks what they should do about transfer portal or opting out or name, image, likeness, whatever else. I think it's really important that we judge this advice after the fact. Was it good or not? The coaches obviously are going to have their feet held to the fire because they are very public. They have to do right by their players now so they can get more players in the future. And so, we judge them on the way in which they, bring these players up and help develop these players. But sometimes the more, off the radar advice that some of these players get, I think it's important that advice sometimes be judged there as well. So I think it's an interesting time that we live in college football, and I just hope the players that are playing this sport are very careful about the advice they choose to listen to. A few examples of why that might be true. All right, it's good to have you with us on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Before I get Jeff Sentell, let me also mention this here really quick. Many of you have heard me talk about now for a while the Finnish long drink, which I think is a great beverage and so much fun. And, listen, this time of year when you kind of get in and get ready to enjoy a beverage, I think the thing that you want is, nobody wants to be like a professional bartender, right? Unless you are truly a professional bartender. But when it's time to, enjoy some beverages with friends, it's like nobody wants to be sitting at the bar and mixing and shaking and stirring. It's just a lot of work. That's why I love the Finnish long drink. It comes in a can, but it's not a beer. It's a ready-to-drink cocktail kind of already mixed for you right there in the can. So you pop the top and you're ready to drink. I'm telling you, the flavor's great. You got the strong liquor kick to this, but you've also got, I like the original in the blue can, which kind of has like a little grapefruit hint to it. And I said before, kind of a nice gin flavor there as well. There's a cranberry version. I know many of you like that. That's really popular as well. And some of the bars around Athens, there's the long drink strong, the long drink zero, a lot of great options and just really great stuff. It's from Finland. It's been popular there for a long time. Now it's in the United States. And a lot of folks are kind of saying, what is this Finnish long drink and where can I find some? If you'll check out the website, thelongdrink.com, you can actually figure out where it's being sold close to you. at a bar near you, at a beverage store near you, whatever else. You can actually find that out for yourself. The Finnish long drink is close to you, I'm pretty sure. But if you'll go to thelongdrink.com, you can find out just how close, specifically where, and you can enjoy some. The Finnish long drink. Check it out. I think you're going to really, really like it. All right, before we're done, it certainly seems like college football is heading in the direction of a 12-team playoff. Sooner, by the way, rather than later, although not official as of yet. We will do all of the latest news on that. This is actually really interesting stuff. But for now, everything related to the decommitment of Bear Alexander, really interesting insight from Jeff Sentell. He shared this with us before he left on vacation for a couple of days. So check this out. It's On the Road, assisted by AAA. Good to have you with us here today on DawgNation Daily.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Great to have Jeff Sentell with us on a Friday. Always nice to talk some UGA recruiting with him, even though Jeff has actually already made his way to a little bit of a vacation, some time off. Still good enough to share some time with us. We kind of go over all the big twists and turns of UGA recruiting as of late. I will remind you that this is recorded a little earlier in the week. We're reacting mostly to the Bear Alexander news here. If something big happens in the intervening time, we'll obviously catch up with Jeff Sentell on that really soon. So let's go on the road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sentell right now. And Jeff will try to pick up the pieces here, at least for Georgia fans. I mean, I can tell you I wasn't, happy with the news, of course, that Bear Alexander decommits from Georgia after taking a visit to Texas A&M. The Aggies, have been thought to loom large in the recruitment here, and I guess this kind of changes everything. But my first question for you, though, if you don't mind, is how much does this change things? I mean, I already thought this was going to be a contested recruitment, kind of down to the wire. Alexander was saying all the right things as a UGA commit, but you knew A&M was going to be a factor here. So the fact that Alexander is now officially on the open market, does that make things different for his recruitment from a Georgia standpoint now?
Hey, Brandon, I guess, man, my big thing, and that's kind of why we went on live after the news dropped on Alexander, is he was saying and doing all the right things. And there's still elements in place for me that think he could still very well wind up at Georgia. He was passing a lot of the checks that normally when I look forward and I try to feel like, how committed is this guy? How invested is he in the class? How much does he love Georgia? And I even covered a very difficult subject with him when I was like, listen, man, I know you're going to take visits. What should we interpret from that? And he's like, well, I think as long as you're transparent, you're committed. You tell them that you're going and they know what's up. Nothing's coming as a surprise. Then to him, that was his version of loyalty, because everybody's got a different version these days of commitment or what it means to be a commitment, especially coming out of the COVID-19 era, which shuttered all recruiting. And Brennan, as we speaking of vacations and beautiful scenes, Big Bear Alexander is in Miami right now on an official visit. And I think a lot of those official visits become universal with any program with Bear Alexander now that he is decommitted from Georgia. I would say really the best way I would answer your question is Bear Alexander's commitment, Bear Alexander's recruitment becomes a normal recruitment now, which means he will go through his paces, he will go through his search and discovery and research, going to compare feelings, going to compare vibes. The thing for Georgia fans to cling to is I would say that there is a lot of emotional capital for Big Bear Alexander with what he feels about everyone at Georgia, not just his potential coaches.
So let me do kind of a rapid fire thing here for a moment, and you can give very short answers to these questions because I want to build to something. Now that Alexander has decommitted from Georgia, would you view Texas A&M as the favorite in his recruiting?
I would not. I would call it all even, Brandon.
So I guess that's was going to be my next thing then. So is it all even between Georgia and Texas A&M, or all even between Georgia, Texas A&M, plus any other school that Alexander might visit?
I think exactly what I'm thinking here, Brandon, is I think while Georgia and Texas A&M are knowns, I think there's a curiosity for all the unknowns that may have an early edge, because those are the schools that Bear is going to see first. He's going to try and see an Alabama. He's going to try and see maybe a Texas. He's going to try and see a Miami like he's doing this weekend. He's going to try and see an Oklahoma, a Clemson. A lot of these schools, the bigger schools, will kind of creep into the mix here as he starts to figure out what he still needs to see and comparing it all out.
The other thing here is, and this commonly comes up from a lot of Georgia fans as we're on the road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sentell here today. Nick Williams was obviously a factor in Alexander's recruitment. That was a guy he felt close to when he was a Georgia pledge. Williams moves over to Texas A&M. Some Georgia fans are wondering, well, maybe Georgia should just have backed up a Brinks truck and paid Williams whatever he wanted to remain employed as an analyst here at UGA. Maybe that would have helped with Alexander. Maybe that would have kept things, really solid with Deion Bowie there as well. Obviously, he and Williams share a hometown of Bainbridge, Georgia, which also happens to be Kirby Smart's hometown there as well. I mean, how big of a factor one way or another do you think Williams is in all of this?
So let me give you a couple things. Brandon, it's no secret that Georgia has had great, excellent recruiters, and they have moved on for other jobs. I would think Jay Valai is a name that comes to mind, where he ends up at Kansas City with the NFL as an analyst, and then he ends up with Texas as a on-field coach, and now he's at Alabama. Jules Mortimer is another guy that was once in Georgia's recruiting wheelhouse. Now he's doing a lot of the recruiting at Florida. So I think Nick Williams was highly successful at Georgia. He could sell Georgia in a way that few could, because he grew up in Georgia. He played at Bainbridge. He played at Georgia. He coached at Georgia. I don't know if all those dominoes align with Nick Williams at Texas A&M. Of course, they do not logically. So he's going to have to carry his weight with his demeanor, his vibe, his easy rapport with recruits. I think he's making Jimbo Fisher and maybe that program a little bit cooler again, especially in the SEC West. I think the Brinks truck example, it wasn't going to be as simple as paying the man what he was worth or what he was deserved or whatever Texas A&M was paying. I think Nick Williams knew exactly what the succession plan for an on-field job looked like at Georgia, and he thought his chances at Texas A&M were better.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. We've kind of talked about some of that on this show this week a little bit there too. When you look at kind of the downside of this, I want to give the worst case scenario for a moment. Let's say that Alexander decommits from Georgia, and we never really mention Alexander and Georgia in the same sentence again. I'm not assuming it's going to be quite that dire, but let's just say that it is for a moment. Like, the one thing I said on the show in the immediate aftermath of Alexander decommitting is, I can't really be mad at Georgia for going after him for a couple of reasons. First of all, this is an elite prospect at a very rare position. Think about just the difficulty of replacing a guy like Jordan Davis. The fact that Alexander can do that and kind of fits a similar fashion, I mean, that's a prospect worth going after. And in addition to that, there's no obvious evidence that Georgia's pursuit of Bear Alexander has hurt it with any other defensive line prospect we might discuss. All these guys, Travis Shaw, Walter Nolan, Mikael Williams, kind of all on down the line here, they all have a lot of other schools they're interested in, and Georgia remains one of those schools. If I thought Georgia going out and messing with a guy from Texas who was going to be a little bit of a long shot signee anyway had hurt it with some other defensive line prospect, I guess I would have probably criticized the program for making a little bit too much of an aggressive decision when something a little safer might have made more sense. But there's no obvious evidence that's happened here. If Georgia doesn't end up getting Alexander, if he ends up going to the in-state school Texas A&M, I actually can't fault Georgia for going after Alexander as hard as it did, and in this case, taking home the silver medal, which is worthless, but an example of the fact that it was probably for Georgia a fight worth fighting.
Yeah, Brandon, I'm going to try and choose my words carefully here. I think there are elements still going on in Bear Alexander's recruitment, which will ultimately determine where he winds up. And I think, for instance, I don't know if a lot of people know that Bear Alexander also has family in the state of Georgia, in the Atlanta area. And, they like that family circle likes the thought of being near Atlanta, a vibrant southern city. You also, Brandon, this thing with Bear Alexander, man, I saw the seeds for this thing, man, back in November, December. He already sounded like he was a Georgia commit walking. The way he felt about Georgia, different than any other school. And then he decides he felt that type of way to commit on National Signing Day for 2021. I really don't think the race and the chase for Bear Alexander is over, but to cover your point, I think what it does is you look at Christian Miller, for example. Christian Miller is a guy that knows Georgia, feels a certain type of way about Georgia, and now he has been visiting Ohio State. He's going to visit Southern Cal. So he's going to have an idea of what's out there before he takes his really pivotal trips to Georgia. And then that's a nice way to compare the whole field. Walter Nolan is a guy, I'd been hearing that he was going to be in town this week. No matter what he said or tweeted about, coming off that Florida visit from this past weekend that apparently went so well. I see that 24/7 Sports is also reporting that Walter Nolan will make a trip in the next few days to Georgia as well to check it out. But you keep looking down the line, Brandon. I mean, it's funny, Tyree West has taken at least 3 visits right now. He's a guy that I thought was all Georgia as well. Travis Shaw, the really impressive defensive tackle out of North Carolina, as it stands right now, he's going to come in and visit Georgia on the same weekend that his buddy Jalen Walker is taking an official visit to Georgia. That's the 3rd weekend in June.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Georgia fans have an ideal mix of about 5 or 6 names. Let's be smart here, Brennan, and let's include Aaron Bryant in that list as well of potential defensive tackle options. And I think if a lot of people could say if the tic-tac-toe involves one of the 3 from Nolan, Alexander, and Shaw, then Georgia's building what it needs. Does it also include Williams? Does it also include Miller? Does it also include Bryant? Does it still very likely include West? I think this is a question of, no, Georgia's not going to get all of them, but doggone it, it looks like Georgia's going to get more of those top guys than they ever had before. And I think that's the end net addition to the program I think a lot of people are looking at.
I want to finish in a moment by following up on something else you talked about when you joined the DawgNation video channels a little earlier this week to talk about this situation. Before that, though, let me remind folks we're on the road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sentell here today. I'm obviously enjoying being on the road here this week. When I do, I'm glad I take AAA with me everywhere that I go. I get hotel discounts, and my family really took advantage of that over the course of the Memorial Day weekend. And, you get the legendary roadside assistance, because let's face it, if we break down the side of the road, BA here is probably not going to be too adept at fixing whatever's broken, but AAA certainly can. I'm glad to have that. But that's not the only thing I want you to think about AAA for. I also want you to think about AAA for auto insurance there as well. When you switch and save with AAA, you can save on average $529. That is great savings, and it's a great thing for you to take advantage of today. So you see there on your screen, let me give this to you, AAA.com/auto insurance. That's AAA.com/auto insurance. You can switch and save with AAA today, and I think you'll be really glad that you did that. All right.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, so good stuff there with Jeff Sentell. At the end there, we had to edit out the last question because it was about Deion Bowie. Unfortunately, that news changed from the time we recorded that until the time that we were able to play that there. But really good stuff from Jeff Sentell nonetheless, and certainly appreciate him being on the road with us, assisted by AAA. As DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger, rolls on now, I want to do some playoff talk around the SEC through here in a moment. First, though, my friends at secondchance.law. A great website, great law firm. Those who need that second chance in life. Many of us do, let's face it. That's a big part of success stories, taking advantage of a second chance when you need one and when you get one. And that's what the Georgia law now provides for, but it can be confusing to figure out how you can get certain criminal convictions restricted off your record. Well, that's what secondchance.law can help you with. You go to their website, secondchance.law, answer a series of questions, kind of an online Q&A. You can determine your eligibility. If you're not eligible, in some cases, they can actually help you get eligible. So it's a great way for you to have a better job opportunity or a better place to live, or really all kinds of things like that you can benefit from. And just check them out. One of the partners, former, two-time UGA graduate, former Redcoat band member, longtime listener of DawgNation Daily. So I feel really good about recommending secondchance.law because I love the service they provide. And it's just good to do business and help support dog people here, and that's what secondchance.law is there as well. So please make sure you find them today, secondchance.law. All right, so this is the news related to the college football playoff. So there was a working committee that was put together to explore the idea of expansion, and that came out yesterday that they are recommending a 12-team expansion of the college football playoff. Now, what's funny is there have been, surveys done of athletic directors, things like that in the past, and almost no one seemed to want a playoff expansion quite that big. But I think in reading all the reporting that's been out there, and there has been so much over the course of the last few days, the reason why we're talking about such a big playoff is because, let's say you go to 8, and you have some automatic bids, which is going to be a part of this. You can't get the votes for the playoff expansion unless you have the automatic bids. The conferences that are commonly making the playoff, obviously such as the SEC, don't want to lose any opportunities because of that. And so when you say, we'll have a 12-team playoff, 6 of those bids will be automatics, 6 of those bids will be, basically at-large picks, all of a sudden that seems to be the kind of format that sort of helps everybody out. And boy, this is one of those things I've told you before. When it comes to changes to a sport that I love, I am very, very nervous about those changes. And I'm very skeptical sometimes of the people who seem to want to push radical change on college football. I'm just suspicious of their motives, and I don't mind telling you that. However, even with all that said, the more you kind of think about this, the more you kind of listen to the way that it's described, my knee-jerk reaction to this is, it's hard to imagine, from my perspective, this won't be better for college football. It just seems really fun. The idea that the top 4 teams will get a bye, and then the 5, 6, 7, 8 seeds will get a chance to host playoff games in their home stadium against the teams seeded 9, 10, 11, and 12. It's those home playoff games that are going to be really attractive. And I think it's kind of interesting that as it stands right now, Notre Dame and Jack Swarbrick, the Notre Dame athletic director, is kind of, I think he was the chairman of this working committee. He was certainly a big part of the working committee. It seems like right now Notre Dame is either quietly on its way to the ACC and just not telling anybody, or they're sort of okay with the idea that as they won't be a conference champion, based on the way this is all written out, they would never be eligible to be one of those top 4 seeds who gets a bye into the next round of the college football playoff. And so, as I said before, this either means that Notre Dame quietly is eventually going to rejoin the ACC on a full-time basis, or they're kind of fine with that because they like the idea better of playing the extra round and getting a chance to host the home game. Listen, if your team like, say, Alabama here for a moment, who, has been a top 4 seed every year but one in the college football playoffs existence, let's say that level of success continued, which is not an easy bet because Saban's near the end of his career, but let's say it did, Alabama might be in a position where they never get a chance to host a home playoff game because they're never seeded below a 4 seed, which is kind of interesting. On the one hand, it's closer to winning a national championship, but I do believe a chance to host a playoff game in your own stadium is going to be a really, really attractive thing. So there's going to be a lot of debate, who gets the home games, who gets the buys, who gets left out, beyond the number 12. Ross Dellinger from Sports Illustrated did something interesting. He put a grid out of what the top 12 rankings have looked like the last few years, and I think it's important to note something here. That while this is what the top 12 has looked like these last few years, I'm going to highlight a couple of these examples in a moment, this is not necessarily to mean this is exactly what the playoff would have been like had this format been in place then. So, for instance, in 2018, that was the year that Georgia lost close in the SEC championship, but if there was a 12-team playoff, based on these end-of-season rankings, not only would Georgia have made the playoff, they would have been hosting a playoff game in Sanford Stadium, and they would have been playing, am I right to say, they'd have been hosting Washington in 2018, if I'm looking at this correctly. I'm sorry, that's not true. They'd have been hosting LSU. Georgia would have been hosting LSU in 2018. So can you imagine that? You go from being upset to not making the playoff, to now you're in the playoff in Sanford Stadium. You get a rematch against LSU, a team that had beaten Georgia a little early in the season. You talk about a much different December and January's worth of conversation, completely different there. Also in 2019, Georgia got beat up pretty bad by LSU in the SEC championship, but they would have made the college football playoff. And if I'm doing this correct, they would have hosted Florida. That's just crazy to think that's what would have been. Once again, that's not. That's not true. Georgia have been hosting Memphis, I guess. Would have hosted Memphis there on the basis of that. But either way, in the playoff more frequently, hosting these playoff games, it's kind of a fascinating thing. But I think it's important to note, though, that right now the committee, once you get past the top 4, they don't spend a lot of time thinking about who gets ranked where after that. And part of the reason why we're changing the format of the playoff as it stands right now is because there's already a little bit of an artificial ceiling, at least that's the belief, in place for the group of 5. Because as it stands right now, they technically are eligible to earn their way into the playoff, one of the teams from the group of 5. but it seems to never really be taken seriously. And if you watch the week-to-week rankings of the playoff selection committee, there just seems to be this sort of artificial ceiling on top of whatever the best group of 5 team is. And so if that's true now for that one team, I think you could see a little bit of maneuvering beyond that when it comes to the actual 12. You're going to just be thinking more deeply about this. So it's not quite the same thing as saying, if you go back and look at the top 12 from the last few years, that's what the playoff would have looked like. I don't quite think that's exactly the way this plays out, because I'm not quite so sure when it comes to where, Georgia, Florida, LSU, teams like that were ranked in non-playoff years for them, that the committee was really putting all that much thought into kind of who was going where. There will be a lot more deliberation when you know that the 12 teams who actually are ranked 1 through 12 are making the college football playoff. All of a sudden, all the issues that the committee deals with now, they'll be dealing with not just 1 through 4, but 5 through 12 after that. So it's really pretty fascinating all the way around there. Very, very interesting stuff. And there's been a lot of good reporting out there on that. I guess the soonest this could happen, I think, is 2023. The current TV contract, actually, I believe, runs through 2025, but there is seemingly some momentum to start this even before the current contract runs out. So there's going to be a lot more that comes out about this. I guess September's the earliest that anything officially could be determined and decided, but I guess the key takeaway here is that it is far more likely than not that this is happening. Not official, not done, but far more likely than not that it is happening. Probably benefits Georgia. I guess there's a way of thinking that it could benefit the SEC, just given how commonly the SEC has multiple teams in the top 12, and potentially a fascinating new horizon for the sport. I'm a little nervous about big change, but I have to say my knee-jerk reaction to this for the moment is that it would be a change for the better. We'll make that your SEC through. All right, so as we get ready to say goodbye to you today, quick reminder, this is our last live show for a week. Next week we have pre-recorded shows, and I do believe they're really good. A lot of great interview content, a lot of great Georgia football talk, just looking ahead to the upcoming season and just kind of talking about where this team stands to be by the time the fall is done. I think it's going to be really fun. The one thing we can't do, obviously, is react to news as it happens. So if something big breaks, and there's a chance that it does, we'll obviously be here to talk about that with you live the following Monday. Sincere thanks, though, for allowing me to be away, enjoying some vacation. I hope all of you have a great week there as well. Want to take care of some business as we close things out today. Want to give you a couple golden shoes here today because I'm a little bit behind on honoring some golden shoe winners. So go ahead and throw one of them up on the screen here. Our buddy Bank 6. Remember the unathletic alligator we talked about the other day? Bank 6 says, well, he's found another one in the state of Georgia that Terrence Edwards has been coaching up and getting ready to play. I think Bank 6 is right about that. Our buddy Mad Dog also has a good one there as well. Very funny Dan Mullen meme. The Georgia bowling ball knocking down the Dan Mullen pins. Mad Dog says when you're planning the perfect strike on October 30th, and no doubt Georgia's looking forward to doing that. And I'm looking forward to having a great vacation. Looking forward to seeing you again next Monday. Before I say goodbye, though, Gator Hater Countdown. 141 days from right now. Y'all, we'll see you back here Monday for DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger, and I'll be live with you back again the following week after that. Have a great weekend. Talk to you soon. DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews podcast to cool down. Can I see that Ross Dellinger graphic on the screen one more time? Because I pretty well botched the teams that Georgia would have played. So Georgia would have played LSU in 2018. They would have hosted LSU. As the 5 seed in 2019, Georgia would have hosted Memphis. So I said the wrong thing a moment ago. Georgia would have hosted Memphis as the 5 seed in 2019. Now, as I said before, in real life, they're going to completely rearrange all this because, as it would have stood last year in 2020, Georgia would have gone on the road to historic Nippert Stadium to take on Cincinnati. My guess is that in real life, they probably would have reversed that and made Cincinnati come to Georgia. I don't believe they would have ranked Cincinnati ahead of Georgia if that was the real situation. But they very well might have. But anyway, that's kind of what the playoff would look like. And I think there's a lot of case to be made that would be a more interesting scenario end of season than ultimately what Georgia did deal with in the situation where it was. So good stuff all the way around there. We'll take some of your comments on both Facebook and YouTube, and then we'll get ready to roll off the air after that. Hope all of you are getting ready for a great weekend and all kinds of stuff. All right, let's see what's going on here. Oren Chile says Jamie Newman will be okay because he's got a Wake Forest degree in his pocket, and that's certainly a good degree to have. There's no question about that. Mary Martin Corbin says she's been having some issue on Facebook, and I apologize for that. If that's the case, I'm certainly sorry to hear that. Matthew Goodwin says, doesn't the top 6 conference champs go 1 through 6? Yes, that's the way that it would currently be slated. And the top 4 conference champions would also get – actually, that's not the case. I think it's just the top 4 conference champs would get the 1, 2, 3, and 4 spots. The top 6 ranked conference champions get automatic bids, but that does not mean they're seeded 5 and 6. Does that make sense? So you've got all these conferences in college football, and you're essentially going to treat them all equally now. So like the 10 conferences that make up the FBS, at least according to the letter of the law, would be considered equal when it comes to the college football playoff, and the 6 conference champions ranked the highest would then be automatically placed into the college football playoff. So that in most years would be the Power 5 leagues and then one Group of 5 league. I guess it is possible that, let's say you had, a year like this past year where it was like Coastal Carolina and Cincinnati. If there was a huge upset in the ACC title game and I don't even know who it would be, but, let's just some North Carolina State or some team like that were to knock off a Clemson or something along those lines, then you conceivably could have 2 Group of 5 teams make it in over a Power 5 conference champion there. But that, for them, in most years, is going to be fairly unlikely. But the way it's worded is those 6 highest-ranked conference champions would get automatic bids, and then the other 6 teams would be at large. But once you're in the playoff, then you're kind of seeded. However, the top 4 seeds would be the highest-ranked conference champions, and then 5 through 12 would be just kind of seeded. However, the fact that you were a conference champion would not give you seeding precedent necessarily over someone else. And as we said before, the interesting scenario there is the fact that Notre Dame would not be eligible for a top 4 seed. And so you would think, well, they're either contemplating going into the ACC full time, or they're also contemplating the idea of it's actually better to be one of those teams that's 5, 6, 7, 8, getting a chance to host the game on your home stadium. And some people have even said that the actual fair thing to do would be, and this is not what it's going to be, but the fair thing to do would be to make the 1 through 12 deal be, the first round of the playoff be kind of, neutral site stuff, and you actually work your way to a quarterfinal where you're playing those games on home stadiums to give the very best teams a chance to do that too. But they're not going to do that. They want to keep the bowl system involved here. That's obviously still pretty lucrative for college football, and that seems to be the thing there. Jermaine King says, start saving your gas money for all those playoff games across the country for the Dogs. Yeah, it's going to be expensive travel, whether you're in the media trying to cover it or you're just a fan trying to follow it. It's going to be expensive travel, and yesterday there was some pushback because some questions were asked about that essentially said, well, fans have a choice to watch it on TV if they don't want to go. And I think you see this right now, like, Kentucky basketball fans, for instance, whereas you have a SEC basketball tournament, you have, a first-round location, and then you have a Sweet 16 location, then a Final Four location. For a lot of the Kentucky basketball fans who are used to seeing their team, Kentucky doesn't go as deep into the tournament as they once didn't even make the tournament this year. But, Kentucky basketball fans for a while have had to kind of pick and choose which games they want to attend. The very richest of the rich can go to them all, but that's not very many of those Kentucky fans, because that's pretty expensive travel year after year after year. So you may see college football become some version of the same thing where, depending on where the team is playing, you say, oh, well, I've been to that location before, so therefore I'll just watch this game on TV or whatever else. The other thing, I don't want to get too deep into this, but my guess would be for Georgia season ticket holders, and many of you are obviously, in this boat, a home playoff game in Sanford Stadium, if I had to guess, that will not be treated as a extension of your home season ticket. In other words, the idea that you have right of first refusal for the seat that you have been sitting in for that full year, or in some cases for decades prior to that, my guess is that that's not how UGA chooses to observe that. And I have no way of knowing exactly how this plays out. But my guess is there would be an entirely different seating hierarchy in place for a home game played in Sanford Stadium as there is for the the actual home season ticket. So go ahead and buckle your chin strap to be mad about that, because I would say that's probably coming. And I guess RIP in peace to anyone in the Georgia ticket office who has to try to explain that policy or, handle those phone calls when they start coming in. But if I had to guess, that's the way that's going to go down, is that Georgia may view those tickets as a little too lucrative to just make those an extension of what you've been doing for the season up to that point in time. Oh, yeah, Steve Highland brings up a good point. I should have mentioned this during the regular show. It's kind of a shame that I didn't, but Jaquez Jones, the leading tackler from Ole Miss a year ago, has landed at Kentucky. This is a guy who's had back-to-back seasons of 70 or more tackles for Ole Miss. Going to a Kentucky defense, it's already pretty good. So pretty interesting stuff there for the Wildcats defensively, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because I should have already mentioned that. Nature Gator says if the playoffs expand to 12 teams, the regular season should be reduced to 10 games, with teams only playing conference foes, or 9 conference foes and 1 out of conference BCS team. Yeah, I mean, I'm just not going to do that, because it's only 12 teams who make the playoff. There are 130 teams in Division I football. I'm not going to ask, 120 or so, 118 teams to play fewer games so 12 teams can play more. I'm just not going to do that. I respect player safety and things like that, but I think there are other ways to address that, especially since only a few teams are going to be making the college football playoff. Let's see what else. Paul Anthony Baseball says, can you imagine the number of people that will be in Athens the first time UGA ever hosts a playoff game? Yeah, I think Paul's right about that. It's been a while since we've seen this, but it used to be one of those things where, like, you'd have, 93,000 people in the stadium. In some of these big SEC towns, you'll get, almost that many people outside the stadium there as well. A lot of folks just come to the town to be in the town the day of a big game. And because of pandemic a year ago, and just because a lot of these huge games like that are a little bit fewer and far between than they used to be, you don't get as much of that as you used to. But I think that Paul's right about that the swelling of the population of Athens for a day like that would just be unbelievable. And this is one of those weird things where if you gave me my choice of 2023, if this is the first year this happens, or 2024, whenever it takes place, if you gave me my choice of, hey, Georgia's a top 4 seed, which obviously puts you closer to a national championship, or they're the number 5 seed and they're hosting a playoff game, I think I'd rather see Georgia host a playoff game, I think. That's pretty amazing. Jay Shipes asked why I'm vacationing in College Station. I'm not going anywhere near College Station. Nature Gator says it's not just a health issue, it's an academic issue, a social issue, other issues. Yeah, I mean, most of these kids, I guess, are taking online classes as it stands anyway. So, I mean, I think you could do that pretty much wherever you go. That would just be a trade-off I'd be unwilling to make. And I'm not saying you're wrong to consider other factors. I think that you are. But, this notion that college football needs to get smaller for most so it can get bigger for a few, I just personally think that'd be a bad trade-off. Jordan Bowman talking about Will Shipley. That's one of the names to know for that Clemson offense. You got to be careful with him for sure. Memphis Dog said, would there be buys for a 12-team playoff? There would be buys. So there'd be 4 buys, which is a little bit like how the NFL playoffs used to work anyway. Back when there were 6 teams, you had the 2 top teams from the conference that got buys. This is a little bit similar to that, except everybody's coming in the same pot here. But 1, 2, 3, and 4 get a bye. That means 5, 6, 7, 8 host 9, 10, 11, 12. So you play those games, you have 4 winners. Those 4 winners go on to play the 1, 2, 3, and 4 seeds. And some people have said, well, why don't you, just reseed at that point in time? Because let's say there was an upset, it might potentially be unfair to the 1 seed. And that's what you can't do here. Here's what I really predict throughout all of this. That the brackets and filling out these brackets, even though it's not a 64-team bracket the way the NCAA tournament used to be, now 68, the filling out of these brackets is going to be really interesting. And so when you start reseeding teams, you actually lose the ability to fill out a bracket and kind of follow that bracket the full way. But with a 12-team bracket, it's not that hard to have a perfect bracket. Now it's still somewhat difficult, but it's not that hard to have a perfect bracket. And so you're going to have a lot of these bracket contests where not only you're trying to pick the winners, but you've also got to kind of pick the score somewhat correct too to kind of help break ties and things like that. I think that my personal belief is that a 12-team bracket with tiebreakers and picking correct scores and margins of victory, things like that, I think that's going to become really fun. I mean, I just think it's going to be a huge deal if I had to guess. Let's see what else is going on. Kevin Grammer says it might be finally a chance to get Florida in Sanford Stadium for Georgia. It could certainly be that way. Bank 6 says, I'd love this. Imagine a Texas A&M Texas playoff game at Kyle Field. Yeah, I mean, these rivals aren't playing each other anymore. You've seen, some rivalry matchups in basketball. Right? We saw a Kentucky-Louisville tournament game a few years ago, right? That when you have, a tournament and there's really very little way to avoid this kind of stuff. You might see some of these matchups in the college football playoff that are either rivalries that have kind of gone dormant or renewals. Like we saw Georgia and Auburn play an SEC championship game a couple of years ago. That the modern postseason just gives you a chance to see things you never would have been able to see before. So I think it's all really fun to consider. Let's see what else. Let me go back over to Facebook for a moment. I know Facebook's had some issues today, it sounds like, but good to see Tennille Calvino still checking in over here. Whose birthday is it today? William Perry. Happy birthday, William. That's awesome. I hope you have a great birthday and enjoy yourself, and I appreciate you spending some of your birthday with us. Certainly happy birthday to you. Congratulations on that. Marshall Fleming says what it means is most years there are going to be 3 SEC teams in the playoff, and many years 2 SEC teams playing for the title. And, that's where I kind of wonder, right? It's like, obviously, based on the previous rankings, you would have gotten that plenty. But I do think, and once you have a 12-team playoff and it's for real, I do think the committee is going to be really careful about putting 3 SEC teams in the playoff. It may happen just as frequently then as it does now. But I don't think you can say because you've had so many years with multiple SEC teams in the top 12, that means that that's going to be guaranteed to continue. Because I do think much the same way now, the committee is mindful of politics and mindful of finances and all the other factors that kind of are part of the college football discussion. They'll be just thinking about that now beyond just 1 through 4 and also thinking about that 5 through 12 there as well. It could be that it's 3 teams every single year, but I do think the committee will think long and hard about giving the SEC the same level of imbalance in the new playoff as it does now, because the SEC dominance is a big reason why they're looking to kind of reboot this and do it a little bit differently. The other thing you brought up is, the 2 teams playing for the title. That's where I think that you could really be onto something is my biggest reason for wanting a bigger playoff is I think a bigger playoff, when you do make more rooms for at-large teams, whether it's A&M from a year ago, Georgia the couple of years prior to that, or even Georgia from last year, if you want to talk about, the 12-team playoff. I think by having a bigger playoff, you are making it more likely that the 4 teams who finally emerge as semifinal teams are the best teams, and now you have better games. I think one of the and I've said this now a couple times this week, but one of the reasons why you have such dud national semifinal games is because, for the most part, the committee just has not really picked the 4 best teams in most years. They have defaulted towards conference champions. They've defaulted towards national parity. They've defaulted towards things like that when, picking an extra SEC team would have made the playoffs better in almost every single year that it hasn't happened. I mean, case in point, the 2017 playoff, thrilling Rose Bowl for Georgia over Oklahoma. Georgia loses to Alabama, which is disappointing for us, but most people kind of thought that it was a pretty thrilling game. Multiple SEC teams led to a better playoff, and I think that would have also been true in 18, 19, and last year in 2020. So it could be by expanding the playoffs, by making room for at least 1 more SEC team, if not 2, then you do work your way up to better semifinals, maybe a better title game there as well. So good stuff all the way around. I'm going to get ready to wrap up. Thanks for being here for R.S. Andrews Cool Down today. Y'all check out R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com. Enjoy the shows next week. Big thanks to Connor Riley for helping me put all those together. Really good stuff that he kind of sat in on the last few days to help us get that done. I think you're going to like them. And we will be back live a week from now to react to all the news that happens while we're gone. But pre-recorded next week, really fun shows. We'll see you for them, and hope you enjoy yourself this weekend, this week, and all summer long. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We'll see you Monday, everybody.